all you lovely people. Welcome to Turn Up the Radio. I'm RadioRayes, joined by my lovely co-hosts Hypabolic and Desiko.
Hello.
Uh,
Hey.
And today we're joined by Mr. Shwoo. Tell us about yourself, sir.
Hey, yeah, so I am a storyboard artist primarily. You may recognize me if you are fans of Longest Solo Ever, who was previously on this podcast, as the person who did the storyboards for both Code Red and an unreleased, unfinished, and unfortunately canceled What Remains of Me video. I also did brief segments for the No Exit video and the Everlasting Fun video, the newest Kanito Pet one. Uh, Other than that, I also do a lot of my own stuff on my spare time with just drawing some of my own original characters, and I'm also working on a web comic that will hopefully be out sometime this year. When is
Whoa.
determined,
A lot of
but
really cool stuff.
yes, Hypa, you've seen some of the early stuff. I've been sharing it with you.
Yeah, and it
That's
looks really cool so
yes,
far.
that's so exciting.
So, with that,
My
what got
first
you started
question
in
for
all this?
you, sir.
My
No?
bad.
Yeah, what'd she say?
So the question, making sure I heard correctly, is what got me started in art.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's a bit of it's a fun story. So I have been doing art for literally as long as I can remember. So like around like since preschool at the latest. And the reason that I was drawn towards the arts and specifically cartooning so strongly, I put a lot of this on my dad. I blame him entirely for the direction my life has gone. Because my dad, for people who don't know me personally, which is I assume like solid 95, 98% of the people watching this.
Yep.
Uh, my dad is a political cartoonist in my hometown city paper.
Oh.
Uh, and so I grew up watching him make these comics. I obviously didn't understand the political stuff. I do now, and I think that they're actually pretty funny because we agree politically, thankfully. But like as a kid, I would watch him draw these characters, and I thought it was super cool. Again, very fuzzy memories. I was a small child, like under the age of 5, but like that very much influenced my sort of interests in specifically cartooning, as well as the fact that like I grew up watching Cartoon Network quite a lot. A lot of my favorite shows are Cartoon Network shows from when I was a kid, like Adventure Time, Amazing World of Gumball. Surprisingly, I kind of skipped out on Regular Show. That's one that I've been wanting to go back and watch because I've heard it's very, very good, but I just haven't gotten around to it. Gravity Falls, I don't know, that's not Cartoon Network, but that's another one of my all-time favorites. So yeah, just a lot of mostly what got me into art was just the environment I grew up in.
I gotcha.
Yeah, for sure. Your dad being a political cartoonist is really interesting, actually. Do you know how long he's been doing it?
I know he's been doing art in general for a very long time. He had a comic in his college's like student newsletter, I know. I don't know how long he's been doing specifically political stuff, and I know he's been doing art stuff since before his comic and his college paper, obviously, but I don't know exactly how long. But it's he does comics, and now that I'm going to college specifically to do sequential art, which is comics and storyboarding, so like very similar paths that me and him have taken.
For sure. Um, that kind of ties into my next question. What made you realize your passion for the arts? What was the moment where you were like, yeah, this is my thing?
That's a really tough one. I don't know if there was like a specific moment, but I know generally And without getting too into some of the more personal stuff, when I was in elementary school, I was not super happy most of the time. But something that I always did look forward to was enjoying different pieces of media, whether it be cartoons or like video games or anything like that. And so, like at some point along the road, again, I can't pin down an exact moment or like a epiphany moment, but like it very much became my like goal. This is the thing that I knew I wanted to do was I wanted to sort of return that favor with creating pieces of media that people could relate to and like sort of see themselves in, or maybe not even necessarily that. It could just be something that's dumb fun, just a thing that they can rely on when they don't feel like there's much else they can rely on.
Oh yeah.
And that sort of stuck with me as the reason that I like doing what I do. Along with I enjoy creating. I'm a creative person kind of inherently, I feel like. And
Right.
storytelling is like a need for me. I need to have some kind of creative outlet. And but yeah, so just the passion really came again similarly with my environment, which I that sounds bad. My parents are great. I love my home life.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
But like it was honestly more the school that I went to was not very accommodating. I am no secret of this. I am neurodivergent as fuck. Uh, and
Yeah.
growing up in the
Felt it.
early to mid 2010s, mental health and that sort of thing was not as,
Yikes.
really well known or
Uh-huh.
respected.
It's a pretty recent thing,
So
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of my elementary school, the teachers for the most part were good. My fourth grade teacher in particular is like someone who really helped me through a lot of like bad spots. But just in general, the individual teachers were fine, but the systems in place were not very accommodating. And so definitely as someone with both autism and ADHD, the school setting that I was in was just not a good fit. And so it was very stressful, very just kind of disheartening. But then having these sort of hobbies that I could like fall back on, which all involved different pieces of media that I enjoyed, uh, yeah, that sort of realizing how happy that those pieces made me when like I wasn't happy other places, really just made me feel like this is an important thing and people need to keep doing this and I want to be the person to keep doing this.
It's really
Absolutely. It's really like interesting to hear how little mental health was respected back then.
Yeah, I actually,
And like I'm happy there are better systems in place now, but like, you know,
yeah, I
wild
have a
stuff.
really
Anyway.
funny story surrounding that. It's like a slight side thing, but it's a pretty quick
Mhm.
one. So, I got tested for a bunch of things when I was in like third grade, I want to say it was. And I got tested. That's when I got my diagnosis for ADHD and autism. Uh, but what I found out later on in life uh, was apparently I scored like I don't know what the system they used was, but like they had like a points thing. I don't know how it was, but I apparently scored 1 point, a singular point below the threshold to get a depression diagnosis.
oh
Uh,
no.
I now am diagnosed with depression years later, but it was just
Yeah.
I remember because I talked with my parents about it. I was like, "Hey, I've been doing some research on this, and I think I might have depression." And my mom mentioned that would make sense when we got you tested for other stuff. They did mention you were very close to the threshold, and I was like, "Oh man, I wish you had told me that earlier." But also, like,
Yeah.
it's like that's kind of one of those things where I feel like again, I'm not as aware now because I did this forever ago, but like I feel like that's something that would have been brought up a bit more nowadays. It's sort
Mhm.
of a, and again, I'm glad that I was able to look into this sort of stuff. Like, obviously, self-diagnosing can be very dangerous. Is why I didn't. I looked into it myself, saw connections, and then went to get a formal diagnosis, which is what
Absolutely.
everyone else does
Mhm.
For
too. But it's like, because I for a while, as in sort of like middle school, early high school, my backup plan in case if artists fell through was I wanted to be a psychologist. And so I looked into a lot of psychology stuff, learned about depression through that, and like all the symptoms, and like so many of them, I was like, wait a minute. I thought that was just a normal thing that everyone felt like similar
I
systems with.
I
But
mean, I want to say it's being taught a little more and way more respected than back then. Like that's ridiculous.
oh yeah, no, for
But
sure. Like
like, yeah.
in my lifetime, I have seen mental health be from something that was like pretty commonly like the butt of jokes to being like a very respected, like, hey, we should take this a lot more seriously, which like
Mhm.
I'm very glad to see because like obviously it is something that is very serious. It affects the lives of a ton of different people in a ton of different ways. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Mhm.
I think it affects like pretty much everyone.
oh yeah, for sure. I think that a lot of people probably have different mental health problems that they just aren't aware of.
For sure. Um, Kind of going off on a tangent here, completely unrelated, but what are some of your biggest inspirations with your artwork?
Oh, I've got a lot of those. Okay, so
List them off. Oh yeah.
yeah, so
Yep.
the big one that made me realize that I wanted to do storytelling specifically. I know I said like, oh, I knew I wanted to do entertainment for a long time, but like what specifically I wanted to do was kind of nebulous for a long time. I knew I liked making characters, but other than that, uh, it's kind of a joke in art school is that everyone likes making characters. It's not like a really special thing that's generally considered to be the most fun part. But like I Gravity Falls was what made me realize I really liked uh serialized stories. Because
Yes.
Gravity Falls at the time, especially Gravity Falls obviously has been massively influential. So many shows that have come out since then in the same sort of like middle grade animated series have followed the
Mhm.
Gravity Falls formula, but at the time when Gravity Falls released, there wasn't really much else like it. And so seeing this show that was like episodic, but there was an ongoing plot, and it was like obviously appropriate for kids, but still had like mature jokes and mature themes. It was like it was a horror show at the end of the day. Like its genre would definitely be horror,
For
and
sure.
like that was really fascinating to me and really sparked my want to be like I realized, hey, I can tell these sort of stories that don't have to be like super linear or like super like all at once. Like it doesn't have to be a movie. It can be a show, and I can have these breaks in between big plot things of like
Yeah.
more like slow paced things. And that so Gravity Falls, especially at the start, was my biggest influence. Nowadays, if you ask me, I would probably say Adventure Time is also up there. I love
Mm.
Adventure
Really
Okay.
Time.
good.
If you look at my art style in particular, a lot of influence from Adventure Time with the way that I do, like just sort of body proportions. Not as noodly
Yeah.
as Adventure Time, but like the general circular heads, fairly simplistic body shapes. I don't usually add a ton of detail to clothing. Uh, very much, and Adventure Time, as a result, that's an art style that I really like imitating. But so yeah, Adventure Time, big influence. Gravity Falls, big influence. When it comes to my more horror focused stuff, Junji Ito is a big one. If you guys are familiar with him, uh, very influential.
Not in the slightest.
Okay. Uh,
Is he like it? Is he an artist?
yeah, Junji Ito is a like prolific, that's the word, manga artist who does horror stuff. He's very well known for it in the sort of like horror sphere.
Right.
He, I'm trying to think of any stories you might be familiar with. Very Uzumaki, Enigma of Amigara Fault, the Hanging Balloons. Any of those ring a bell?
I don't think I've heard of any of them.
I think the
Can you do like
first
a
Now that
one
little
you
did. I
synopsis
mention
of one
it,
of them?
think the first
now
one
that you
has, you
mention it, I
mentioned.
think I have heard. I think I have heard of Junji Ito, but yeah,
Uh,
I'll
what,
have to. I'll have to look again. But I think, yeah, I do know who you're talking about.
okay. Also, Hyper, you asked a question. I didn't quite pick up what it was.
I
Oh, my
don't think
bad.
I've heard of any of them. Maybe you could give us a synopsis of one of them?
Yeah, so I'll do Enigma of Amigara Fault. That's my favorite of his. It's a really Junji Ito is really good at taking very mundane concepts and making them terrifying. Which if you I've seen plenty of interviews of his. I actually did a research paper on him for one of my art history classes.
It's really
So
interesting.
yeah, I looked a lot into his sort of process because of it. And Junji Ito, like a lot of uh, like famous horror artists are, this is the trend that you'll see if you look into them. Uh, Paranoid guy. He's afraid of a lot of things. And so he will see these sort of everyday things, and then his mind will be like, what if this was the way that this was? And he will make a story based on that. The Enigma of Amagara Fault, and I may be making this up. I can't remember the source, so this might be fake news, but I'm pretty sure this is true. Was inspired because he was walking down a sidewalk and he saw a crack in it that looked vaguely like the shape of like a squiggly stick figure. And you'll see where that comes up when I explain the plot of the story. Most of his stories are short stories, so it's not like a super long thing. But basically, the story goes that in Amigara, which is a place in Japan, I believe. I don't fully know. I'm very bad at geography. But there was an earthquake, and it caused a fault line to appear where there's just a massive, like, straight wall of stone, basically. Uh, and the weird thing is, there were these human-shaped holes all along the wall. People were to see what it was because, like, what the hell is this? This is super weird. This was literally underground. How did these get here? And the people who went to visit eventually began realizing that the person-shaped holes in the wall weren't just holes, they were tunnels, and they perfectly matched the proportions of different people who went to visit. As they go deeper into the tunnel, the proportions begin to very subtly uh, shift so that they aren't perfect in such a subtle rate that it doesn't stop them from continuing. It just makes their bodies bend to match the new proportions.
Oh, that's
Oh,
really
And
cool.
That's
oh,
really interesting.
at the end of the tunnel is an opening, which is this super. They just look like random cracks, and then it ends with a figure that is like very obviously implied one of the people who came in through the uh the side that looks like humans, and it's just this stick figurey mass of blood and guts coming towards the camera.
That's
oh,
so neat.
It's
that's
That's
really,
cool.
really
That's
so
good.
awesome.
cool.
I
It's
love that.
really good. I highly recommend looking into Junji Ito's work.
Absolutely. Yes. That's genuinely like so different from the usual horror stories I hear. Like
Yes,
that's
no,
really
I
cool.
think that his best work are the ones where the monster is not a thing that you would really ever think of as like a standard horror monster, because like the monster in that story isn't even really a monster. It's just this weird thing that happened, and there's no explanation for it, but like it just leaves you with so many questions, but like it gives you enough that you're like, that's terrifying. It's really good. Uh,
For sure.
so yeah. Other than that, um, it's probably my biggest inspirations: Gravity Falls, Adventure Time, and Junji Ito, which is a mad trio. One of those is not like the other, but
Yeah, gee, I wonder which one. I think Gravity Falls is the odd one out. Yeah. And I think I've seen its like inspiration on your work, not only in like your art style, but in the types of stories you write and like the lore behind your characters and their designs and everything.
yeah, I'm a big horror fan in general, which is why Gravity Falls really spoke to me. I always have been a horror fan, even when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I was scared of literally everything. Like I was super easily scared, but I was so fascinated by the things that scared me. Uh, and that has really stuck with me, where like I'm still so drawn to like the darker types of media with like
Yes.
it's just like that's something that has always appealed to me.
Hmm. Like the different ways different stories and media kind of instill fear is really interesting to study,
Oh, for
especially
sure.
for people who are like going into the horror artistry sort of path.
Hmm.
Because like things obviously there's things like I don't know, Friday the 13th, right? Like you know, like hockey mask man slashes people death, you know. But then there are like the deeper layers of fear, right? Like the less obvious ones. And like that's really the layer where like it gets the most intriguing for me at least.
I fully agree. My favorite horror movie is The Ring, the original Japanese
Yes.
version of The
Yeah.
Ring, which is very much like that. Sadako, obviously, she is very threatening. She can kill you with her mind by looking at you, which that's scary. She crawls out of TVs. That's scary, very blatantly and obviously. But her design, even when I was a kid and I hadn't seen the movie and didn't know the context, I had just seen her design. She scared the shit out of me. And like,
Oh yeah.
she's just a woman. She's just a like short Japanese woman in a white gown with her hair covering her face. That really shouldn't be as scary as it is, but like she's just the right level of unnatural. The fact her hair is covering her face, you can't tell what her intentions are. She stands usually kind of like limply. It's like it's entirely the presentation of her design that makes her just completely
Yeah.
terrifying, even if you know nothing about her.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like that's the sort of thing that I love studying like design philosophies of different horror monsters for that reason of like
Right.
that's why Silent Hill is I've never played Silent Hill 2 or any of the Silent Hill games, but I really want to. But even without having played them, I'm a massive fan of the like art direction of that series.
Yes.
The monsters, each of them representing a different part of the main character's psyche and like their own traumas, and like seeing the way that the artist took that sort of concept and turned it into a tangible threat is like it's so fascinating. That is something that I very much do my best to try to emulate when I'm designing monsters for my own work, is like what is this monster supposed to represent, or what fears am I really trying to play on with this monster, and how
Right.
do I like really pull out the essence of this fear and turn it into something tangible.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think that's super cool.
Mhm. How often do you do horror art? Like,
uh
I don't think
it's
I've
not
seen very much of your horror
Yeah, so
stuff.
it's not my main thing. Mostly I draw my D&D characters,
Yeah.
which yeah, well, like they aren't particularly scary. But my comic that I'm making, Fairview, is a horror. It's a horror comic. Not straight horror, but it involves a fear-feasting nightmare demon who is able to shapeshift into people's fears and can kill them in their own dreams, a la Freddy Krueger.
Yeah.
And so
As it
And
that's
he's
does.
Barney
very
the dinosaur.
Oh my
yeah.
god.
So that's a very like horror concept, but and I usually play that part of the story very straight for the horror, but the whole thing itself isn't necessarily strictly horror. Um, but yeah, so that again goes into the Silent Hill being another sort of inspiration for me. Is there's a demon that feeds on people's fear and tries to bring out, like, make them feel the most terror they have ever felt before he kills them. Uh, and it's sort of like, I guess that's kind of close to Pennywise,
Yeah, I was about to say
too.
that.
But
Reminds me a bit, yeah.
yeah, so he's a shape-shifting monster. He can create his own dream realities. And so really, again, taking that sort of Silent Hill approach of like, what form does he take here to really like traumatize this person?
He shapeshifts
Because
into a red
basically,
balloon.
say again?
He shapeshifts into a red balloon.
Yeah. That's
A red
Pennywise
slipper.
special. Uh, no, so yeah, horror is not my most common genre I work with, but it is probably my favorite at the end of the day. Like, uh, I also a lot of the times, uh, this is not my own original work, but I do a lot of concepts for Dead by Daylight, just in like
Mm.
my spare time. Dead by Daylight does a sort of uh fan cosmetic contest every year for their anniversary. Where like basically what it is Dead by Daylight, if you aren't familiar, I'm realizing I should explain, is it's a multiplayer horror game where one person plays as the killer and four people play as survivors to try to escape them. Uh, and so every year for the game's anniversary, they hold a contest where fans can create their own submissions for cosmetics for either the different killers or the different survivors that are playable in the game. And that is something that I love doing. I've only entered once, which was last year. It didn't win, unfortunately, but a lot of people liked it. And the winner of the contest, by the way, gets their cosmetic made into an actual skin in the game, which everyone can get for free.
Ooh, that's
Uh,
awesome.
which is
That's so
yeah,
sick.
it's
Yeah.
really really cool. So yeah, I entered last year for the first time. It didn't win, but it got a ton of support. And like it is to date my second most liked thing I've ever posted online. Which, like that's super cool. Recently, and recently I mean yesterday, I posted another concept, which was not for any contest or anything. It was just for fun, which was a crossover skin line, because Dead by Daylight also does a lot of crossovers. They have characters from a bunch of different horror properties as playable characters or as skins. Uh, and so I wanted to do my own concept for a crossover skin line based on Lethal Company. Uh, and I posted that the other day. It was three different skins for the three of the killers, each of them based on a different monster from Lethal Company. And that has done very well as well. Just in
So
general, I
cool.
was talking about this with Dean uh, yesterday, where my Dead by Daylight stuff in general does really well. Uh, so that is where a lot of most of my horror stuff comes from either me working on my comic or me doing Dead by Daylight stuff.
For
But
sure.
yeah, it's something that I really enjoy doing.
So, what would you
Yes.
say is your favorite part of drawing?
Just
Sorry,
drawing in
Radio.
general or drawing horror?
Either, honestly.
Okay. Well, in general, it is honestly just like I have so many ideas all the time. And like not all of
Same.
them are good. Not all of them are good, but
Oh yeah.
It's just
We
like
have like
oh,
7,000 terrible ideas before we get
yeah,
one good one.
exactly. Yeah, you get it. You're similar to me in that regard, from what I can tell. But I just really like making little guys at the end of the day. I like making little guys and giving them stories and giving them designs.
Yeah.
And it's fun. There's something so rewarding too about putting in a bunch of effort and like a lot of times art can be frustrating. I like doing it, but it can be really frustrating sometimes.
Oh,
But
I
like
feel you on that one.
Incredibly,
the
incredibly.
Yeah.
the end result of seeing the finished piece is so worth it, and it's so
That's what I'm saying
rewarding.
too,
And that's
yeah.
something that I a lot of the times really enjoy. Sometimes the most is like getting that, like going through the struggle of getting the proportions right, or man, for some reason, this like certain aspect of the design is giving me trouble, or like the perspective on this is slightly off. How do I frame this perfectly? And I'll spend like hours on like this one part, and then I get it, and it's so worth it because it's like I went through that, and the end result is something that I'm happy with. And yeah, and then like, I come back a month later, I'm like, man, I could do this so much better now. But
That's so
Yeah.
real though,
that's
that's so
that's
real.
yeah, that's besides the point. But yeah, like that's one thing I really like. And then with horror in particular, it's just that I like the genre, honestly. There's nothing too much more special about horror, why I like it, but it's just like
Fair, yeah.
getting to sort of make these uh like very unnerving things is just fun. And one thing that I also love, and I've some other people I've talked to who are horror artists, this is a general thing that we all seem to like quite a bit, is when you show someone your finished piece and they're like, "This is fucking awful. You did a great job."
Yeah.
It's just
Like,
horrifying. Don't show
yeah,
me this ever again.
Yeah.
yeah. It's like that's one of those things that I love. Is like I hate looking at this. Good job.
Yeah.
It's such a it's funny and like this
Their reaction's
very
the best part.
and yeah, like in this just this inherent way that like there's a humor to be had in the fact that what I'm not creating this to get a pleasant response out of someone, and
Yeah.
when they give me a negative response, that is exactly what I was looking for. And it just like that there's something about that that's very cathartic. uh and
Like
just
getting called insane is the best response I could possibly ask for.
yes, exactly. That's that same feeling.
A great compliment.
Yeah.
uh
While on the
Yeah,
topic of your work and your like the art
oh,
you create,
my bad.
it's okay. Um, is there any project that you, or like any project or art that you're currently working on or that you have done and have published that you're genuinely so proud of and like most fond of?
Ooh, man, that's a tough one. I haven't put out a ton of stuff that's like fully published as like a big project. But honestly, the storyboards I've done, like the full video storyboards I did for Dean, are up there for me. Like they were my first like big like paid work that I've done. So like they hold a special place for me for that. But also like just in general, I feel like I did a pretty good job on them. Uh, the What Remains of Me ones, I think I'm slightly more biased towards, just because I am a FNAF fan. I'm not super familiar with Sonic or any of the like Fatal Error EXE stuff. Uh, so like
Same.
uh, I wasn't as attached to the property it was based on ahead of time. With What Remains of Me, uh, I've been a big fan of Five Nights at Freddy's since the first game came out. So getting to work on a project related to it was like that was like a childhood dream come true.
Yeah.
And I think it turned out pretty good. One thing that I do think is really funny about that video, you can tell which of the characters I had more experience drawing for fan art. If you go back and watch the What Remains of Me boards, you can really tell like, oh, the puppet, Springtrap, yeah, I've drawn those
Yeah.
characters
Yeah.
so many times. Innard and Scrap Baby, I, those
I can
designs are
see
Not
complicated.
what you're
I
quite.
talking
don't
about.
have much
Scrap
Yeah.
experience
trap.
with
Yeah, no, but now.
uh, but
Peanut looking head.
but uh but yeah, so those are up there. As far as my stuff that I've done just for me, honestly, the submission I made for the Dead by Daylight contest is up there. Like, it's partly just because it got such a overwhelmingly positive response from the community, but just in general, I still think it was a very strong concept. And uh, literally, I mentioned earlier that I did the Lethal Company crossover cosmetic concepts. I had people realizing that I was the person who made my cosmetic entry from last year and calling that out. They remembered the piece and recognized me from the piece after like seeing the similarities in the art style, which was like super surreal because that's the first time
Yeah.
something like that has happened for me. Of like someone recognizes not based on the name but on the art style. And like
Yes.
Yeah, that's
that's
really
Yeah.
cool.
It's an
That
awesome
feels
like
so
feeling.
like
good.
yeah, it's like it made me kind of realize like, oh wow, yeah, no, like people
People like my stuff. You like your
well,
art.
yeah,
Yeah.
people in this community are like familiar with something I made, and like Dead by Daylight is not a small community. It's one of the biggest like games on like Twitch. It makes especially it's very popular on Twitch. But yeah, so that was that's a that was very surreal, and that piece in general is just very it's really stood out to me. Oh, another thing. This happened today, related to the same thing. I was talking to Victini about Dead by Daylight because he mentioned he saw the Lethal Company stuff and was just like, "Hey, this was really cool," and then we just started into us talking about Dead by Daylight. I looked up the Dredge, which is a character in Dead by Daylight that I based my cosmetic entry off of because I wanted to find a reference image for Victini because he wasn't familiar. And my cosmetic was one of the Google search results,
Oh,
Really?
that's awesome.
That's
which was
awesome.
like,
That's so cool.
yeah, no, that I didn't realize that was the case until today. Like I didn't look up anything in particular. I looked up the Dredge Dead by Daylight and looked through the images, and one of the Google images was a Reddit post that was just compiling a bunch of different fan-made Dredge cosmetics. And mine was the image that was associated with that post, which is like insane. Uh, so because like even when you look up Mr. Shwoo, you get some of my stuff, but you mostly get it autocorrects to Mr. Show, which I don't know what that is.
Oh,
But
that was
The
my
guy that
one of
it's
my
shows
apparently a
notes.
things.
thing. It's apparently a thing. So it's like even looking up my name directly uh, struggles sometimes, but like this completely other unrelated thing that I just happened to do something for, you look it up and like I have a certain level of impact on it is like that was a very that's a crazy thing to have realized. So yeah, I guess thinking on it more, that is probably my published piece, even though it's not part of a bigger project. That is probably the published piece that I have the most sentimental value attached to and like the most.
You know, speaking of your name, by the way,
Yeah,
how did you come up with Mr. Shwoo?
yeah. So it's a it's a really funny story because it's really simple, but it's not. I don't think what people would expect. Uh, so this was back when I was in high school, was when I came up with the name. And it initially was not my username, or like anything like that. It was the name I gave a cutie fly in my Pokemon Sun Nuzlocke, where I caught it. I needed to nickname it as per the rules of the Nuzlocke, and Mr. Shwoo just inexplicably popped into my brain, and I was like, yeah, I'll go with that. And then that cutie fly carried me through the Nuzlocke. It was the ace of my team. and it was really funny because its name was Mr. Shwoo, and like that just like it became an inside joke for a bit, and then it evolved into just like I was like, that could work as a like username, and then it just has become my username since then.
That's actually really funny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
um,
I mentioned this on my Twitter a few days ago,
mhm.
where like there was like some people was being like, "Hey, how did you get your username?" And I told this basically the same story, but before I designed Shwoo, the little bag-headed like shadow creature that is my current like avatar,
I
uh,
love
it was initially my avatar was initially going to be a cutie fly in a top hat and a bow tie. Uh, and like Cutie Fly is not my favorite Pokemon. It's not even close. Like I like Cutie Fly, but it was because of the association with the name. And like it's crazy because it was so close to that being uh my like mascot. But then uh at very similar times, Little Nightmares 2 and Guilty Gear Strive came out, which both have characters with
Ah,
bag
it.
heads that I like quite a
yes.
lot.
Yeah,
And
they're
I
really
was
fun.
like, yeah, both Mono and Faust. And so I was like, I really like this sort of like paper bag head aesthetic. I want to design my own character like that, and then I did, and then that became my mascot, which has remained my mascot, and it's at this point probably my permanent mascot. Like I really like Shwoo as like a design, so definitely like might get a few redesigns here and there, but the basic character will, like, I don't see them getting replaced anytime soon.
For sure. While we're kind of at the tail end of this interview today, um, is there any advice you would like to give to those interested in your sort of field of work?
Um, I've got definitely a few things. First off, don't be discouraged if what you're making is not up to your own standards. That is true of everyone when they start, and quite honestly, the somewhat unfortunate but also kind of like refreshing advice. Like it's good to hear this because it makes you feel less like terrible about your own art. Is that it doesn't really stop. Even the people who you look up to will look at their own stuff and think this isn't up to my standards. I could probably make this better. Or they will compare their own stuff to other people. Which also, by the way, don't compare your work to other people's work. That is a death sentence of
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Absolutely.
innovation.
Don't do it,
Toledo,
don't do it.
we will find you.
It's a trap. Everyone falls into it, but it's bad. Don't give into it. Your
Don't
art is incredible. Like no matter who you are. Uh, that's a big thing. Is just like don't be discouraged if something isn't turning out the way you want it to, or if you aren't quite where you were hoping you would be at this point. It's everyone has their own journey. Everyone grows at their own pace, and the only way to stop growing is to stop creating. And if you keep creating, you will grow inevitably. Then, other than that, this is a piece of advice that I have learned very quickly and somewhat recently is that, like, if you want people to notice you and you want to make these connections to, like, people who you respect or just, like, in general, you want to make connections in the art world because connections are the key to making it places in terms of like, you know, I don't want to say like success is fully tied to like, oh, what number do you have on social media or like how much money do you make? Like that's success for art is such a there's so many camps you can put it into. It's such a hard to define thing. But in the terms of if you want to make a career out of it, the best way to success is just to reach out to people. Like you just talk to people, not necessarily for the sake of talking to them, but like, because, people are busy. They don't have time to respond to every random stranger who just tries to make small talk with them. But like, if you want to make a collaboration with someone, you think that you have a project and this one person whose art you like or music or whatever, you like their stuff and you think they'd be a good fit, reach out to them, have a pitch ready, hit them with the pitch, and there's a good shot that they will either be on board for it or at the very least take interest in your work. That is how I met LSE. Is I asked him to make music for a mod I was working on, and since then we have continued to stay in touch. Uh, and through him, I have made a few other connections, and like just in general, been invaluable. And it wouldn't have happened if I wasn't just like I have this idea. I think that you could help me with this idea. What are your thoughts on the matter? Like it's intimidating, but if you have the confidence with it and you have a clear idea, uh, it's always worth it. It might not always lead to something, but like it's always worth a shot. Like the worst that will happen is they'll just say no. Like if you're respectful about it, that's the worst that will happen.
For sure. It's really big into you miss 100% of the shots you don't take,
Yeah,
Yeah.
right?
100%.
And
That's
sure.
just
like,
good life advice too, not
yeah,
just with
Yeah.
art stuff. Is
Applies
like
to everything.
if you want to do something, just just go for it. Like do it tactfully, do it respectfully to whoever else is involved, but like you will miss out on so much of life if you just sit around and wait for life to come to you. Sometimes you have to take initiative, and it's hard sometimes. It's very hard a lot of the time, but like if you just again, if you just sit around waiting for things to change, they aren't going to on their own. Like sometimes you'll get lucky and someone else would make the change for you, but like the only way to ensure that it happens is you do it yourself. Uh,
Yeah.
for sure.
I remember seeing
Um,
like this video I watched that it's kind of what you just said, but it's like change will always happen in your life, so you might as well be the one to make that change, you know?
yes, that yep, very very true.
Yes.
but yeah, I think that about wraps it up today. Where can we find your stuff? Like, do you
Yeah,
have a social media? Where do you
yeah.
post your stuff?
So the main social media that I use is my Twitter account, which is at Mr. Shwoo, capital M, capital S, no spaces, just MRSHWOO. Uh, that's where you'll see me most active. And it like yeah, basically that's I have a YouTube channel too. But every time I post something there, I link it on my Twitter. So if you just follow my Twitter, you'll find that too. I have an Instagram, but that account has been dead for like a little bit over a year now. So
And
wouldn't necessarily bother with that. It's yeah, again, Mr. Shwoo. I'm Mr. Shwoo everywhere. But yeah, so people unfamiliar with my work, please go and check me out on Twitter. Once my comic is out, that'll be on Webtoon.
yes, yes, do
Hmm.
that. Do
Yeah.
that.
Do
Do it
it.
now, boy, do it
I
Yeah,
want
now.
to see it. It's super cool. I love it so
once
much.
that's out, it'll be on Webtoon. Also under Mr. Shrew, it'll be called Fairview. Um, and again, for updates, my Twitter is going to be the first place that I let know when it's out. Again, shouldn't be too long. Hoping it's going to be sometime this year. Uh, right now, I'm working towards getting 5 chapters done and ready to be put out, so I can upload them. Like I can kind of roll them out over time, give me more time to work on the next chapters while they're coming out. Uh, Currently, I've got 3 of the 5 done, so I'm currently sort of taking a bit of a break from it because I've got classes I've got to do a lot of work for. But
Ah, yes.
Life,
one,
life is in the way.
yeah, if I could just only have to work on that and then like have my hobbies, that would be ideal. But unfortunately, I've got class, and then after I'm out of class, I'm gonna need a job. So it won't be like as much time dedicated to it as I would like. But once I am uh, a bit more settled into my new school quarter, I'm gonna start picking up work on that again, and hopefully by at the latest October, things will start rolling out.
Heck yeah.
That's fun. Yeah, that's fun.
Well, thanks for hanging out with us tonight, Shwoo.
Yeah,
Um,
no, thank you
I
for having
am
me.
I am RadioRayes, joined by my lovely co-hosts Hypabolic and Desiko.
Blah blah blah.
And next month we'll be talking to The Power of Fresh, a small nerdcore musician. And yeah, we'll see you then. Thanks for listening,
Thank
Yes.
and we'll
thank
see
you
you.
for joining
Tra
us.
la la, tra la
Yeah,
la.
thank you guys.